Hello and welcome to Tabletop Oddity. My name is Jay and today I'm going to be showing you how to make Lothal style hills for Star Wars Legion. You could possibly use them in other games, but it's sort of specifically a Star Wars planet. But I don't know if these hills are recognizable anywhere else. Of course, big shout out to Rob Hawkins, who has his blog showing how he did the Gen Con tables. This is sort of like my bad version of that, so big shout out to him and that blog. And these are what we're going to end up with. Yeah, they're sort of slightly different, but achieved very similar. This one I've cut in the ridges instead of like drawing them on with a pen. You can sort of just take your pick which you prefer. There's no right way to do it. It's your own choice. And yeah, it's very simple. But what you will need is some styrofoam. Now I use extruded styrofoam for this. You could use polystyrene, but it's bobbly and you'd have to make sure you texture it properly with filler. But let's just get on to the process. They don't take very long and they're quite effective, I think. So let's have a look at how you make these. So I start with extruded styrene. I'm using something like 5 centimeter, I think 50 mil, but you can essentially just use any thickness you've got. The only thing is you just have to cut them up to the right height. And basically all I do is I cut them out in circular-ish shapes and stack them on top of each other. However, for the one where it's like a big hill with 2 different hills together, what I did was I cut out a big bottom base so that it was connected, and then cut out the circles on top of it. Now, to do the cutting, you really want a sharp blade, like a Stanley knife, but the longer ones. If I don't have one on my desk, so I can't show you, but it's a really long sharp blade, not serrated. That'll give you nice crisp straight cuts. But off camera, to cut the big piece, I just got like a big serrated like steak knife kind of blade, kitchen knife, just because I find that a bit easier to like cut through, and then I tidy it up with the sharp blade. So once you've got your big base, you can just sort of shape it to the correct, like I drew it on with a pen. You can do any shape you like. And then I just, keep slicing parts off till I get a rough bottom shape that I'm happy with. And then I'm going to do the same with another layer. Just cut them to approximately the right size, stack them on top of each other, and then just keep trimming it off till it sort of blends in with the layer below it, and just keep doing that for each one. Obviously getting more smaller at the top, you need it to come to a point, otherwise you'll have an indefinitely sized hill. And yeah, just keep trimming them off. Now I trimmed them quite a lot here before I actually glue them together, but you can if you want to, and I did this with the hill that's on its own. What I actually did was I PVA'd them with cocktail stick. I glued the layers together with PVA and a cocktail stick in between each layer, and then trimmed it off with the knife. You do get a little bit of snagging when you get to the PVA, but not really the end of the world. Whereas in this method, for the bigger piece, I trim everything down so it's vaguely the right size, or right size enough. You don't have to be 100% accurate. Then I sort of dry fit them together, and once I'm happy with that, I just keep trimming it down till I'm even more happy, and then I glue them together using hot glue, concentrating mostly in the middle, because if I do need to do any extra trimming at the end, then of course you don't want to cut through hot glue. And then once you've got it all glued together, you're happy with it, you've trimmed it down, you really want to smooth it, because we don't want these flat edges and sharp corners. So off camera, because if you do this in your house it'll cause an absolute mess, I literally sanded the whole thing so it was not buttery smooth, but quite smooth. It also gets rid of the ridges if that's a concern for you, like the lines between the layers, but in actual fact I'm going to use those as one of the circular indents around the Lothal hill, which for those of you who've not seen, I'll try and put a picture up at the start so we can have a look. And I just went around with a pen for the bigger hills and just drew them in. I did them a little bit too symmetrical. You probably want to do them a little bit more uneven, so that it's not an exact, they don't look exactly the same height for each hill. On the one that's its individual, that obviously doesn't matter, but in this case it sort of does. And then once you've got all your lines, we're just going to cover it in filler. Now the hill that's on its own, I actually, instead of using the pen to draw it in, I actually literally just carved it out with a knife, like cutting like triangles out of the hill, but you don't have to do that. Covering it in filler is fairly easy, just dab it all on. Try and smooth it with your finger. You want it quite smooth. You don't really want too much of a texture because like I think it'll look a bit janky at the end. Like you'll get enough texture just with the filler. Once you've covered it in filler, I went into the ridges basically with the bottom end of a brush, so not the brushy part, and just sort of like made sure there was no filler in the gaps, because otherwise that'll completely defeat the purpose. So just take that out, and you're pretty much done. And then once that's all dried, then I'm gonna sand that as well, because I don't really like it was too textury. If you wet it down as you did it, you'd be okay, but in this case it was quite like too much texture, especially on the big one. So yeah, I just sanded that down, and you want to do that outside. And then for the painting, I probably start off too dark with mine, but basically I just do it in this sort of chocolate brown, which looks a bit like poop. Me and Katie were just talking about how much it looked like poop, and I do apologise because it does look significantly like poop, but I just covered it whole thing in brown. Now you could put a bit of PVA in that if you want. I didn't, but it's up to you. Now you might have to do 2 layers because quite often with filler, it's sort of like there's little holes and stuff like that which you've not quite filled. So do 2 layers. And then I literally just dry brush it up. Now I do apologise for the lighting here. Sometimes what happens is the white balance changes as the paint like gets added more. But basically I just go up in like lighter gradients of sort of light brown, culminating into like a white at the top, and I'm sort of over brushing it so I don't get it in the ridges, I just keep doing that, and I keep going lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter until I'm pretty much happy. I do eventually get to white at the end, but you don't want to go overboard. Now even though this looks fine on camera, what I actually did after this was I gave it a sepia wash, GW sepia wash, sepia, and then dry brushed it again with the lighter brown and the white. You don't have to do that if you're happy enough with it. It's just that I didn't do a great job of over brushing it or dry brushing it. I kept getting it in the ridges accidentally, but you don't have to do that. That's just me being incompetent. And that's it pretty much. Like there's not too much to it in a sense. So this one is literally like 50 centimeter styrofoam. Just I carved it, I like stacked it on top of each other and carved it so it was correct before I glued it together, and then I glued it with hot glue and then just trimmed it back down to make sure that the ridges blended in. Once it was all hot glue dried, I've carved it to the right shape. I sanded it because otherwise it'd look more, it wouldn't look round. The Lothal hills are generally like smoothly round, they're not like jagged edges. And that was that one done really. I filled it up, painted it. Well, what I think I might be a better technique is to actually paint it the lighter chocolatey colour, like the light brown, and then give it a brown wash and then dry brush it again. So instead I sort of just dry brushed it up into like white, then I gave it a sort of sepia wash just to tone it down a little bit, then I dry brushed it back up to white, concentrating mainly at the top. So you can sort of see here it's darker at the bottom, lighter at the top. Fine. And this one I did a slightly different way, but not too different. This is literally just, so it's smaller pieces of styrofoam, so not 50mm, and I just stacked them on top of each other in squares. I didn't even trim them down beforehand, glued them together with a cocktail stick and PVA, let it dry. I still tried to avoid the edges, and then I literally just trimmed it down, sanded it, and then for these instead of doing it with a pen, I carved them out with a knife, which if you've got the time I think possibly looks better, but it's up to you to pick your style you want. It's completely your choice. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way. And yeah, I think they look fine. They're definitely passable. It gives me on the desert board, which I'll try and put pictures up, it definitely gives me that Lothal feel. And that's pretty much all I was going for. Yeah, that's it pretty much. Fairly easy process. It's just a case of how you glue them together, how you stack them together. It's your choice how you get the lines in. Either do it with a pen. If you've got like a sculpting hot tool, then that's obviously better. A knife is fine. I was like using the end of a paintbrush sometimes to just make sure the lines were thicker, so like maybe like here, I would maybe go in with my paint, like the bottom end of a paintbrush. This is the wrong size brush, but you get the idea. And just pushing them out to make sure that the ridges were defined. Covered it in filler, scraped out the filler so that it didn't cover in the gaps, and Bob's your uncle, basically. That's it. That's all there is to it. If you like this video, then do like and subscribe. I haven't made a terrain video in quite a while. I did my Lothal 3D printed house, and then I've done this hill. The next step would be the fence. But I need to have a think about the fence. I'm not 100% sure how to go about it. And I was going to do the big ass building with the foam, but if I'm honest, I can't bother cutting out the foam, so I'm going to probably just look at more 3D printed buildings. But if we do the fence, then I'll show you the fence. But if we don't, obviously I won't. But yeah, as I said, like, subscribe, have a beautiful day. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.